All right, everyone. So happy patch day. Hope you have all been enjoying the recent buffs that Frost has been receiving. I know I have. As much as I love fire, I've always been a bit of a Frosty at heart. And it's a bit, it's definitely exciting to have the opportunity to get to dabble back in Frost. How about how overpowered it was in beta too? I can understand why it got nerfed from that point, but it definitely didn't need to get ground into the ground under Blizzard's heel the way it was. But yeah, we've got some updates, some buffs, a 6% and a 3%, which was nice. And as such, we're getting some questions coming through about what conduits we should be using here. And now is a good time to go over them and what is the best way to go over anything other than making a tier list. So today we are going to do a tier list for Frost Potency conduits. There are 4 main choices to go through, whether you're going to be doing single target, a little bit of cleavy stuff, maybe do a little bit of mythic plus kind of stuff, whether you're Venthyr or Night Fae, if you're Kyrian or Necrolord, hey, sweet. Not that it really matters. The Covenant specific ones aren't necessarily majorly in play unless you are being weird. So let's go ahead and jump in. What we're going to do is we're going to go right on down the line. We will talk about the conduit briefly, talk about why it's awesome or not so awesome, and drop it on the list. Beginning at the beginning, Icy Propulsion, which is pretty much the Big Daddy, top tier, A+, #1 conduit for Frost Mages. The tooltip reads, while Icy Vein is active, your critical hits reduce Icy Veins cooldown by X seconds, where X will be determined by the eye level of the conduit. Icy Propulsion is the go-to. It's very powerful. Combine that with Thermal Void, extending Icy Veins to be almost infinitely, well, we can't say infinitely, but we can get quite a lot of cooldown reduction out of Icy Propulsion if you're running Thermal Void. It's a great bit of synergy, which the Frost Mage is made for. We will take Icy Propulsion and drop it on the S tier. I would say it is almost always going to be one of your go-tos. For single target and cleave, absolutely going to be rocking Icy Propulsion. The only time I would say it would be possible to consider it to be not taken would be in a Mythic Plus scenario, when you may be holding Icy Veins, not running it on, not using it on cooldown. Next up, we have Icebite, which is probably my personal favorite. This is the cooldown, or the conduit that buffs Ice Lance. Has the tooltip that reads, increases the damage of Ice Lance against frozen enemies by a percentage determined again by the eye level of the conduit. Most of the damage that you're doing as a Frost Mage comes through your Ice Lances as single target, cleave, or now in our AoE if you are running Glacial Fragments as your legendary, where you're just having exploding Ice Lances all over the place. So I'm actually considering Icebite to be right on up there. It's great in all 3 scenarios. Like I said, single target, cleave, and AoE. So I consider it to be potentially, in my personal opinion, while it doesn't have the DPS potential of Icy Propulsion, if you look at Icy Propulsion on The Sims, it is miles ahead of everybody else. That makes sense if you're keeping Icy Veins on cooldown. If you're not keeping Icy Veins on cooldown, well, you're always spamming Ice Lances. So I think that keeps Icebite right on par with Icy Propulsion in a real world playability standpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and put Icebite right up there on the S tier as well. I think that's also the S tier. So we have Unrelenting Cold. This is the orb conduit. Straight up frozen orb damage increase. Again, how much the damage increased is based on the eye level of the conduit. Now, I am a big fan of the orb. I throw it out there all the time. And this conduit is great in Mythic Plus. You have lots of orbs flying, And Orb actually can put out a good amount of damage. If you look at some of the videos that I have run as Frost, there's one that just went out this week, and you look at the damage breakdown at the end, I have been running Unrelenting Cold, and it does put out a good amount of damage. It is a boring conduit. It doesn't do anything interesting, but Orb is fun when it actually goes where it's supposed to. It generates lots of it generates some Fingers of Frost charges. And it is what it is. So I have to put Unrelenting Cold on the old A tier. So the whole point of this list is to help understand what should you be running, and that really comes down to what is your goal. If you're going to be running in a raid, it's basically going to be Icy Propulsion and Icebite. It's pretty much the ticket. If you're going to be doing Mythic Plus, I like Icebite and Unrelenting Cold. However, there's one more worth mentioning, and that's Shivering Core, which is the Blizzard conduit. This one's a little more interesting because Blizzard's damage is increased by 5% and the movement speed reduction is increased by 10%. So if a time comes you have a need to keep your trash extra slow, you may consider Shivering Core. Now, Unrelenting Cold does pack a little more of a punch. If you can get some good trash packs pulled together nicely and really keep those blizzards out there, Shivering Core, it can really have its opportunity to shine there. And once again, with Icy Propulsion, very good, but it does require you to keep Icy Veins on cooldown. Maybe you want to go like mega AoE, try Unrelenting Cold and Shivering Core. See how that does for you sometime for a super AoE run. I think you would be missing Icebite there though. I gave that a try and my Ice Lances were a little sorry for it. So we're gonna Unrelenting Cold, Shivering Core. As much as I would love to be able to run those big empowered blizzards all the time, especially because we are running Glacial Fragments as our Mythic Plus legendary. Shivering Core usually would be down around the C tier. But since Mythic Plus is great, that bumps it up to the option. Put it on the B. The potential for an AoE extravaganza. And also because it has a great icon of just one of those blizzard bolts blasting down there and just doing great. If we move our way on down through the list now, we have Discipline of the Grove, Night Fae specific. Shifting Power reduces your mage abilities cooldowns by an additional 4% over 4 seconds. This one's great as fire because it gets your combust back up very quickly. As Frost, you don't even use Shifting Power for your single target rotation. On AoE, you do use it to get your orbs and your blizzards back up. Single target, you don't Shifting Power. So a conduit that makes your Shifting Power more. I mean, I don't want to put it all the way down at the bottom. We'll put it down on the E tier. Gift of the Lich. Do we have any Deathborn Frost mages? I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to see your Deathborns. Deathborn's duration is increased by 3 seconds. Now, Deathborn of the mage specs, I believe it would stack pretty well with Icy Veins. It comes in just below Unrelenting Cold on single target, which is pretty bad considering Unrelenting Cold is an AoE ability. I'm gonna have to consider Gift of the Lich to be a bit of an underperformer in E tier conduit. Any Kyrian Frost mages. Fire of the Ascended. Your Radiant Spark increases the damage your spells deal to the target by an additional 5 to 12%. The problem here is that there are no Kyrian Frost mages, and on AoE that is quite poor damage. Go ahead and set this down in tier E. And then last up we have the Venthyr. Frost choosing Venthyr really shines on single target and cleave. So now Siphoned Malice has each time a Mirrors of Torment is consumed, your spell damage is increased by 2 to 5% for 10 seconds, stacking 3 times. And that's a nice talent. So Siphoned Malice, best of the 3 for sure. for sure, but still, Icy Propulsion is so great that unless you are in some sort of a strange scenario where Icy Propulsion just isn't going to work for you, you should be taking that. And then whichever second one makes the most sense, Icebite in single target. If you're doing cleave, it's Unrelenting Cold. And in AoE, it's certainly Unrelenting Cold. However, that is a good sign for old Siphoned Malice here for giving the best showing out of any of the Covenant specific conduits. Siphoned Malice up on the D tier. You could appreciate that. In conclusion, you don't really have to worry about your Covenant specific conduit since they don't really stack up to the 4 Frost specific. And of the 4 Frost specific, Icy Propulsion is unfairly dominant. Sims from Toe Grinder, which I will link pinned in Discord, them in the description below. To clarify, if any of this, if you guys want to dig into this any farther for some, take home studying on any of this material, as a Venthyr, you'll see Icy Propulsion is quite dominant, and that holds true all the way down. No matter which Covenant you're in, Icy Propulsion is the ticket for 1, 3, and 5 targets. The only thing would be if you're not able to maintain really good uptime on Icy Veins, you may start to consider Unrelenting Cold and then Icebite, and perhaps if you're doing Mythic Plus, perhaps Fence of the Grove for Night Fae. Perhaps. Probably not, though. I would go for Icebite. How many targets they're pulling in there? I would stick with Icebite, though. Since those Ice Lances are always flying, you don't really have to worry about keeping cooldowns on cooldown. Icebite is just consistent Ice Lance damage. Alright. So once again, Icy Propulsion, Unrelenting Cold, and Icebite. And that poor Shivering Core. Just wishing it could pull through with some sweet blizzard damage. Hopefully that gets a little bit of love. If you really need to be out there slowing mobs down, don't be afraid of it. Especially in Mythic Plus when you are most likely running Icebringer. Let me know in the comments down below what you all think about the conduits for Frost. Which are you running? Which have you had success with? Hopefully they've all been going well for you. Have you been out there hitting up those Mythic Pluses as a Frosty style? I have been trying to. Still rating as fire, since I haven't gotten my Good Frost legendary memory yet. But I've really been enjoying Frost in the Mythic Pluses. Just put up a video commentary, there it is there, of a +10 Spires of Ascension. That is also on the tubes, go check it out. And I hope to see y'all back here on Twitch soon. Now we're gonna go hit some Torghast up. Alright, thanks folks. Hit that old like and subscribe down on the YouTube. We'll see you again soon. Peace!